السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. All thanks and praise are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may His peace and blessings be upon His last and final messenger, His family, His companions, and those who follow them until the end of times. So alhamdulillah, last week we covered the meanings of verses 79 to 82. And those verses, they dealt primarily with a portion of the story of Dawood and Sulaiman alayhi salam. So inshallah tonight what we'll do is we'll cover verses number 83 and 84. Now again, in this last section of the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He briefly mentioned an episode from the life of Dawood and Sulaiman alayhi salam. So He mentioned some unique, some special, some amazing gifts or blessings that both of them were given. So for example, Dawood alayhi salam, the mountains, the birds and iron were made subservient to him. Right? When he would recite the Zabur, when he would recite his revelation, miraculously the mountains and the birds, they would join with him as well. And then iron was made malleable for him. He was able to mold and shape iron with his own two hands. And then for Sulaiman alayhi salam, the wind and the jinn were placed in his service. So the wind was obedient to him. He would command the wind and it would take him and travel with him to wherever he pleased. And the same thing went for the jinn. They were under his control and his command. He would command them to do multiple different things. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about these blessings that were given to both of these prophets. And these blessings were mentioned to show the importance of gratitude, to show the importance of shukr. That the more we're given as human beings, the more Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses, the more grateful we're supposed to become. The more gratitude we should show to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And amazingly, the more grateful we are, the more Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us. And that's the unique equation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. That if you're grateful to me, if you show or express gratitude, then I will increase for you. I will give you more. So the more gratitude we show to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more blessings, the more mercy He will shower upon us. Now the next set of verses that we're going to cover today, they briefly mention the story of Ayyub alayhi salam. And this is the sixth story that's mentioned within this surah. So Surah Anbiya, first and foremost, it mentioned the story of Musa alayhi salam. Then it went on and mentioned the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Then it mentioned the story of Lut. Then it mentioned the story of Nuh. And the fifth was Dawood and Sulaiman. So the story of Ayyub alayhi salam is the sixth one that's mentioned in this particular story. Now the style of the Quran is extremely beautiful. So the style, the way the verses are related to one another, oftentimes it has significance. It carries a particular meaning along with it. And even the sequence of stories mentioned in the Quran has some significance. It conveys some type of meaning. So as we just mentioned, the story of Dawood and Sulaiman alayhi salam, the purpose was to show gratitude. And the story of Ayyub alayhi salam, the main objective, the main purpose is to teach us about patience. And these are two characteristics, these are two qualities that always go together. Patience and gratitude, sabr and shukr. And these are two qualities and two traits that if we as individuals possess them, it literally makes our life complete. It gives us contentment, it gives us peace of mind, it gives us happiness. So one of the keys to having a happy life, a life that's free of any problems, any stress, a life that's free of difficulties and hardships, or even a life that's free of depression, is through these two unique qualities and characteristics. So no matter what situation we find ourselves in, if we seek help through patience and through shukr and gratitude, then everything becomes easy. Everything becomes good for us. And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ himself mentioned, and this is a hadith we've spoken about before as well, where the Prophet ﷺ said, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ. That amazing is the affair of a believer. Like literally the believer's life, the life of a mu'min, it's completely amazing. إِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ. Every single affair of his is good for him. Everything that happens to one of us is good for us. وَلَيْسَ ذَلِكَ لِأَحَدٍ إِلَّا لِلْمُؤْمِنِ. And that rule, it doesn't apply for anyone except for a believer, except for us. إِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ سَرَّةٌ شَكَرَ فَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُ. if he's tested with prosperity, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him good health, if Allah gives him wealth, and he's living a life of comfort, shakara, he shows gratitude, فَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُ. So that prosperity is good for him, right? That wealth, that money, that comfort, even that's a source of blessing for him. وَإِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ ضَرًّا صَبَرَ فَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُ. But if he's afflicted with difficulty, if he's afflicted with hardship, with illness, with sickness, with some type of injury, with poverty, then the person, the believer, shows patience. And then that adversity, that darra itself, it becomes good for the believer as well. So the Prophet ﷺ is telling us that the proper attitude we're supposed to have as believers, the proper perspective we're supposed to have, is that anything that happens to us in the life of this world is good. It's a source of blessing. It's directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All we have to do is react to it in the proper way. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showering us with His blessings and mercy, we're supposed to express gratitude. And if we're being tried, we're being tested, we're going through hard times and difficulties, we're supposed to be patient. And then life will be good. So Ayyub alayhi salam himself was a prophet from the descendants of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So he's part of that amazing and blessed legacy of Ibrahim alayhi salam, who is known as Abu Anbiya, the father of the prophets. And Ayyub, the name itself, has been mentioned 4 different places in the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala briefly mentions his story in Surah An-Nisa, Surah Al-An'am, here in Surah Al-Anbiya, and later on in Surah Sad as well. And some of the narrations tell us that he was of Roman descent. So in terms of lineage or where he was born, it was somewhere in Rome. And according to Ibn Ishaq rahimahullah, the muhaddith and the historian, the most correct view is that he was amongst the prophets sent to Bani Israel. So he was amongst those multiple prophets that were sent to the children of Israel. So today we'll go through his story as it's mentioned in Qasas al-Anbiya of Ibn Kathir rahimahullah. So Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he was a prolific writer. He was someone who was a great scholar of the past. He wrote a very amazing tafseer that's still studied till this day. And he also wrote a book that covers the stories of the prophets. So before getting into the actual verses, we'll just cover the story as it's mentioned in that particular book. Now before doing so, it's important to understand that the Quran itself, it doesn't tell us the entire story. So when we look inside of the Quran, we don't find the full details of the life of Ayyub alayhi salam. It doesn't tell us what time period he lived in. It doesn't tell us who he was sent to. Nor does it tell us where he was from, what exactly happened, and how he was saved. But the Quran does give us some brief details. It gives us a very summarized version. So the Quran tells us he suffered from some sort of serious illness. Now what exactly that illness was, we don't know. But we do know he was afflicted with a very serious, a very severe sickness and illness. And that he remained patient throughout it. And during this illness, everybody deserted him. His entire family, his children, his friends, his neighbors, everyone abandoned him except for his wife. And when it comes to his family, either they passed away or they just left him. And eventually he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to cure him, and he was cured. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cured him of his illness and gave him back all his children, along with an equal number in addition. Now the rest of the story, right, the main details of the story, they are derived mainly through Judaic traditions. So there's this whole branch of traditions known as Israeliyat. Right, this is you can say the Judeo-Christian traditions. These are traditions that we get from the Jews and the Christians. And a lot of times the Mufassirun, they will use them to fill in portions or details of stories. But they use principles, or they have established principles for using these stories. So first and foremost, they say if any of these narrations or traditions go against the accepted or standard teachings of Islam, they will be rejected. So if some of these stories contain something that we find problematic, we don't accept them. But if they don't, then we don't say that they're true, and nor do we say that they're false. It's just a possibility it could be correct. And oftentimes these details, they just give a better picture, a better understanding of the entire story itself. So when the Mufassirun, when the commentators fill in the details, they're mainly taking it from Judeo-Christian narrations or even from historical accounts. So there's a possibility that they're true, and there's also a possibility that they're not true. Now generally, those that are considered to be historically reliable, were used by the Mufassirun to fill in the details of the story. So the way Ibn Kathir rahimahullah presents it, he says that Ayyub alayhi salam was an extremely blessed individual. He was extremely wealthy, he was living a very comfortable life. He was living a life of luxury. So he was given wealth, he had a lot of property, he had these huge magnificent homes, he had gardens, many children, servants, and attendants. But none of these things distracted him from worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So despite his prosperity, his wealth, his luxury, his comfort, he was someone who was still devoted to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was someone who was expressing his gratitude. And on top of that, he was extremely generous as well. So it's narrated that once a group of angels in the heavens were discussing humanity. Right? They were having a discussion amongst themselves regarding human beings. So they talked about those human beings who were humble, who had humility, they obeyed the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they were righteous, and they were earning Allah's pleasure. And they were also discussing those individuals, those humans who were evil, those who had bad tendencies, those who were arrogant, and those individuals who were earning the displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And while they were having this discussion, one of the angels said that the best human being on earth today is Ayyub. He's a man of noble character who displays great patience and always remembers his generous Lord. He is an excellent model for the worshippers of Allah. Right? He's a good role model for the worshippers of Allah. In return, his Lord has blessed him with a long life and plenty of servants. The poor and needy share in his good fortune as well. He feeds and clothes the poor and buys individuals to set them free. He makes those who receive his charity feel as if they are doing him a favor, and that's how kind and gentle he is. So basically this angel is saying that Ayyub is the best example of a human being alive today. He has a lot of wealth and money and luxury and comfort, but despite all that, he's still a devoted servant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's pious, he's God conscious, and most importantly, he's generous. And along with that generosity, he expresses humility. So he shares his wealth with the poor and the needy, but he doesn't make it seem like he's doing them a favor. Rather, he makes it seem like they're doing it a favor to him. So he's someone who has this humility as well. Now Iblis, being shaitan, he overheard this and became extremely jealous. He became extremely angry. And that's the nature of shaitan. What's the one thing that kicked him out of paradise? Why was he kicked out of paradise? His jealousy, his arrogance, right? So that's his nature. So when he heard this, he also became jealous, he became arrogant, and he became extremely angry. So he went to Ayyub alayhi salam trying to tempt him by whispering to him about the enjoyments and pleasures of this life. That you have so much money, you got so much wealth, you're living such a luxurious life, why don't you enjoy it? Why don't you go spend your wealth and have fun? Why are you wasting your time worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Now obviously Ayyub alayhi salam, he's a prophet, so he wasn't affected whatsoever by these whisperings. And this made Iblis even more angry. So it's mentioned he goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he complains to him. He says that Ayyub alayhi salam, he's not sincere in his gratitude and worship. Right? He's not sincere. The only reason he's worshipping you is because he doesn't want to lose his blessings. So he's not worshipping you out of sincerity, he's worshipping you out of love for wealth. That if he stops worshipping you, he has this fear that you will take his wealth and his money and luxury away. So Iblis says if you remove his wealth, you'll find that his tongue will no longer mention your name and his worship will stop. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Alim, He's the all-knowing. So he knew for sure that that's not the case. And he knew that Ayyub alayhi salam is the most sincere and most devoted servant of his at that time. But in order to prove Iblis wrong, he granted him and his helpers permission to destroy Ayyub's wealth. He said, okay, if you think that's the case, then go ahead. Why don't you and your helpers go and take all of his wealth away? So at this, Iblis, shaitan, he becomes extremely happy. He gathers all of his troops, all of his men, and it said, and he goes and he does something to destroy all of his wealth. So all his property, all his money, all his homes, his servants, his gardens, everything is completely destroyed. Everything is completely decimated and lost. So after this, it said Iblis, very confident and happy, he approaches Ayyub alayhi salam in the disguise of a very old man. And he tells him, all your wealth is lost. And some people say that it's because you gave too much charity. and that you're wasting your time with your continuous prayers to Allah. Others say that Allah has brought this upon you in order to please your enemies. So if Allah had the capacity to prevent harm, then He would have protected your wealth. So basically he's trying to get Ayyub alayhi salam to express some sort of complaint, to express some sort of displeasure. So true to his belief, Ayyub alayhi salam responded, what Allah has taken away from me belongs to Him. Inna lillah. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken away from me, it belongs to Him. I was only its trustee for a while. He gives to whom He wills, and He withholds from whom He wills. Yu'ti man yasha, and what? He takes away from whoever He wills as well. So with these words, Ayyub alayhi salam fell down in prostration and continued to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in the face of such a huge calamity, in the face of losing all of his material wealth, Ayyub alayhi salam didn't despair whatsoever. He didn't express any sort of displeasure. He didn't express any sort of anger or depression or sadness or despair or anything. Simply, he turned back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah gave me this wealth, and He's the one who also took it away. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Hakim, He's the most wise. Everything He does is done with this divine wisdom, so I'm completely content with it. I'm completely alright with it. And he just falls down in prostration. Now Iblis becomes even more angry. Iblis becomes even more frustrated and annoyed. So he goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he complains again that I have taken away all of his possessions, but he still remains grateful to you. However, he's only hiding his disappointment, for he places great store by his many children. Basically he's saying that, okay, we took away all his wealth, but that's not his real pride. His real pride and his real source of happiness is his children. And the real test of a parent is through his children. You will see how Ayyub will reject you. So once again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He granted Iblis or Shaitan permission to harm his children. But He told him that it wouldn't affect Ayyub in any way whatsoever. That you can do whatever you like to his children, but you'll see that it doesn't matter to him. Because he has full faith and full trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So again it says, Iblis along with his worshippers, they went and they shook the foundation of his home. And the narration mentions that the home, it collapsed on his children, killing all of them. So all of his children were killed. And after this, Shaitan again came to him in the disguise of someone trying to console him. And he told Ayyub that the circumstances under which your children died are extremely sad. Surely your Lord is not rewarding you properly for all your prayers. So basically again he's trying to incite him. He's trying to get him to say something wrong. That if your prayer was worth it, if you were doing something that's correct, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have never taken your children away. But Ayyub alayhi salam, the pillar of patience, replied, Allah sometimes gives and sometimes takes. He is sometimes pleased and sometimes displeased with our deeds. Whether a thing is beneficial or harmful to me, I will remain firm in my belief and remain thankful to my Creator. And again he falls down in prostration and starts worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So this is the patience of Ayyub. That his entire family, all of his children are lost. And one of the most difficult things to experience as a human being is the loss of a child. Right? When someone loses a child, it's extremely traumatic, it's extremely difficult, and it's a very hard situation to deal with it emotionally, to deal with it spiritually, to even deal with it psychologically. But again, when we look at the entire corpus of the teachings of Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Quran and through the examples of these prophets and through the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us how to express those emotions properly. He taught us how to control those emotions so that they don't overcome us, they don't overpower us. He taught us how to be patient, how to have sabr in those particular circumstances and in those situations. And all of it goes back to faith. If an individual's faith is sound, if they have absolute trust and reliance in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they have absolute belief in His wisdom and His hikmah, then again anything that happens to them is good for them. They are content with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does, despite how difficult it may be emotionally. And that's what Ayyub alayhi salam did. Now Iblis, he's completely frustrated. Right? He's reached his tolerance level. So again he goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he says, "O my Lord, Ayub's wealth is gone, his children are dead, but he still has his health. And as long as he enjoys good health, he will continue to worship you in the hope of regaining his wealth and producing more children. So grant me authority over his body so that I may weaken it. And he will surely neglect worshipping you and will then become disobedient." Meaning, okay, you've taken away his wealth and we've taken away his children, but he still has his health. And health is a huge blessing, and that's why he's continuing to worship you. If we take away his health, he will become ungrateful and he will become disobedient. Now again, in order to prove Iblis wrong and to show him the patience and sincerity of Ayub, he granted him this request. He said, "Okay, I will give you authority over his body, and you can afflict him with any type of sickness or illness that you like." So it says, Iblis then unleashed havoc on his body, afflicting him with such a severe and painful disease that it reduced him to skin and bones. So, there's some narrations that mention what type of disease it was and how severe it was. And again, none of these narrations are particularly 100% authentic, nor can we trust them absolutely. But it says it was some sort of skin disease, some sort of internal disease, and it weakened him so much that he was unable to do anything. Right? His body was completely incapacitated. He was reduced to skin and bone. But despite that, he continued to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It says the disease and pain spread to every single part of his body except his heart and his tongue. And his heart and tongue remained busy in the remembrance, praise, and glorification of Allah. Even in that severe condition, he remained in the worship of Allah. So through all this suffering and pain, Ayub alayhi salam, he remained patient and strong. His faith didn't waver whatsoever. And it's narrated that his sickness was so severe that every single person left his side except for his loving and caring wife. So everybody abandoned him. They said, there's no use in taking care of him and looking after him. He's so sick, he's so ill, there's no point. So the only person that stayed with him was his wife. She took care of him and nursed him during the entire period of his illness. And some narrations mention that his wife was from the descendants of Yusuf alayhi salam. She was either the nephew or the grandson or something, some type of relationship with Yusuf alayhi salam. Now the period of this illness is also mentioned. So some narrations say that he was sick for maybe 7 years. Some say it was 18 years. Some say it was 13 years. So, despite all these various traditions or narrations, what we know is that he was sick for a very long period of time. And throughout this entire period, Ayub alayhi salam didn't complain even once. Right? Not one single complaint to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That why did you make me so sick? Why did you make me so weak? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? He remained absolutely patient and steadfast and grateful. So it's mentioned that when he lost his wealth, his children and health, he devoted all of his concentration, time and effort to prayer and gratitude. And that in and of itself is an amazing thing. That we as human beings normally when we lose something, the first thing we do is complain. Right? When we face the first difficulty, the first thing we do is complain to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about our situation. Or if not to Allah, we're complaining to others. Or we're at least feeling displeased and we're unhappy and something's going on. But Ayub alayhi salam, he's showing us the proper attitude to adopt. This attitude of patience. And it's mentioned once in a moment of weakness, his devoted wife asked that how long are you going to bear this torture from your Lord? Are we to remain without wealth, children and friends forever? Why don't you call upon Allah to remove this suffering? So Ayub alayhi salam calmly responded that how long did I enjoy good health and wealth? She said you enjoyed life for 80 years. So Ayub alayhi salam said, and how long have I been suffering for like this? She replied 7 years. So Ayub alayhi salam then told her, in that case, I am ashamed to call on my Lord to remove the hardship, for I haven't suffered longer than the years of good health and wealth. Right? Basically, I feel this sense of shame to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove this difficulty and pain from me because I enjoyed life longer than this. I already had luxury, comfort, good health and wealth and everything I could ask for. And now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing me with the opposite. So I feel this sense of shame. I can't ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I cannot complain to Him. Now eventually something happened. Something happened which compelled Ayyub alayhi salam to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove his difficulties, to remove his pain, and to shower his mercy upon him, and ultimately cure him. And that dua is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in this particular surah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَيُّوبَ إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. And mention Ayyub alayhi salam when he called to his Lord, indeed adversity has touched me, and you are the most merciful of the merciful. Now, as we've talked about before, right, as we've been discussing this particular surah, we mentioned that one of the main reasons why these stories are being mentioned is to console and comfort the Prophet ﷺ. The reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning this series of stories, from Musa alayhi salam to Ibrahim to Lut to Nuh to Dawood and Sulaiman alayhi salam, is literally to comfort and console the Prophet ﷺ, to remind him to be patient, to be strong, to be steadfast. So in this verse as well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's speaking directly to the Prophet ﷺ, and He's reminding him about the amazing and enduring patience of Ayyub. وَأَيُّوبَ. So the commentators mentioned that before the word Ayyub, the word udhkur is understood. وَاذْكُرْ Ayyub. That remember the story of Ayyub alayhi salam. Remember all the hardships, the difficulties, the trials, the test he was put through. Remember the fact that he lost his health, his wealth, his children, every single thing, but he remained patient. That remember how he faced difficulty after difficulty, trial after trial, test after test. Remember how he was tested and tried in his wealth, his children, and his health. He lost every single thing, yet through all of that, he remained steadfast and patient. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us of the dua that he made. إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ. Remember when he called out to his Lord, أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ. That I have been touched with affliction. So even in this dua, Ayyub alayhi salam, he's not complaining. He's not saying, oh Allah, this happened and this happened and this happened, why did this happen? All he's saying is that I have been touched with adversity. So I have been touched with this adversity, and you are the most merciful of the merciful. وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. So the commentators, the mufassirun, they mention that this is an extremely concise yet comprehensive dua made with full respect and etiquette. It shows that Ayyub alayhi salam, he truly understood what it means to be a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He had a proper understanding of this concept of ubudiyya, what it means to be a servant, and the true nature of his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in the dua, he's not complaining, he's not mentioning his troubles, and he knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was aware of what he was going through. So he doesn't make an appeal for his condition to be changed, because he wants to maintain his patience in the face of adversity. So even in his dua, they say he's expressing that patience. He's still enduring with that difficulty. And he doesn't make any suggestions to Allah. He adopts an attitude of absolute humility. And that's supposed to be one of the main components of dua. That when we raise our hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask Allah for something, one of the main components is humility. That we approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the attitude that we are in absolute need of Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in no need of us. And we approach Him with the sense of being needy and wanting something from Him. And that's why He's considered to be a model servant. He didn't panic in a situation of adversity, nor did he express his frustration or despair. And he presented his situation before his Lord, describing himself with weakness and inability. And these are two traits that are deserving of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right, so one of the other things, or one of the other components or ingredients of a proper dua is that we recognize our own shortcomings. We recognize our own deficiencies and limitations. That we as human beings, in reality, don't have the ability, the authority, the capability to do anything without the will or help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why we ask Him. That's why we turn to Him. That's why we beseech Him. That's why we beg Him for His mercy and His blessings and His forgiveness. So at the moment, he addressed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this very beautiful way. And some of the commentators, they mentioned that this is dua for the people who are afflicted with difficulty. That when we find ourselves in difficult situations, when we're afflicted with financial harm, or with physical harm, or with any other type of harm, any type of dur, this is the dua we make. أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. And this dua is enough. This is the dua of a prophet that was answered, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded to it. So that's the only thing we have to say. So when we're faced with these difficulties, we don't have to despair. We don't have to lose hope. We don't have to be like, that's it. It's the end of the world. It's the end of our lives. All we have to do is call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. Allah is the most merciful of the merciful. Now as soon as he said these words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded to them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ فَكَشَفْنَا مَا بِهِ مِنْ ضُرٍّ وَآتَيْنَاهُ أَهْلَهُ وَمِثْلَهُمْ مَعَهُمْ رَحْمَةً مِنْ عِنْدِنَا وَذِكْرَى لِلْعَابِدِينَ. So we responded to him and removed what afflicted him of adversity. And we gave him back his family and the like thereof, with them as mercy from us and a reminder for the worshippers of Allah. So in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that He answered his call. He answered his dua. He responded immediately. And He removed all of the hardships, difficulties and adversity that he had faced. Now Ibn Abi Hatim rahimahullah, he narrates on the authority of Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma that when his dua was answered, he was told to strike the ground with his heels. And as soon as he struck the ground, a spring of fresh pure water gushed forth. And as he bathed with that water, whatever illness he had went away. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala immediately revealed the cure for him. Right? Immediately He told him that strike your heel with the ground, or strike the ground with your heel, and this spring of water is going to gush forth. Bathe in it, drink from it, and your sickness will be cured. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also returned his family to him, along with many more children. And as was mentioned in the story, he had lost all of his children to a tragic accident. So Allah blessed him with twice as many. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends the verse by mentioning why He responded to Ayyub's dua and why He mentions this story. Rahmatan min indina. Right? The reason why we responded to his dua, the reason why we removed his adversity and difficulty is because of our mercy. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy is infinite. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy encompasses every single thing. Right? وَرَحْمَتِي وَسِعَتْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. Every single thing in this world, in this universe, is enveloped, it's encompassed, it's covered by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And His mercy is something that's beyond our imagination. It's something that's beyond our comprehension. And to help us understand, in a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ tells us that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this world, when He created the heavens and the earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created mercy. And He divided mercy into 100 parts. And out of those 100 parts, He only sent one down to the life of this world. So every single act of kindness that we see in this world, every single act of compassion, of sympathy, of love, of care, kindness, it's all from that one single part of mercy. And the hadith mentions that the love a mother shows for her child is from that mercy. Or even the love an animal shows for its child, it's from that mercy. And the remaining 99 parts are reserved for us as believers in the akhirah. Right? The remaining 99 parts of mercy are going to be specific for us in the akhirah, in Jannah, in paradise, insha'Allah. Alright, now, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded to his sincere, humble request as an act of mercy. And every gift or blessing anyone receives in this world is from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, وَذِكْرَى لِلْعَابِدِينَ. And the reason why we mention this story, the reason why this story is being mentioned, is a reminder for those who worship Allah. It's a reminder for the believers. It's a reminder for you and I. This entire story was sent down as a reminder. It reminds us to draw inspiration from this story, to remain patient just as Ayyub did in the face of hardship and difficulty, so that we may be rewarded and shown mercy as well. It's a reminder to never lose hope. Right? Never lose hope or despair in the mercy and forgiveness and grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's a reminder that the life of this world is a world of test. Right? This life that we're living right now, this is Darul Imtihan. The whole purpose, the whole objective of this life is to be tested. And that's why we're here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He will test us to see who is the best in terms of deeds and actions in terms of faith. Just because we're Muslim doesn't mean we're guaranteed anything. Right? Just because we're Muslim doesn't mean we're not going to be afflicted with difficulties, harms, and trials. As a matter of fact, they say the closer a person is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more severe the trial, the more severe the difficulties. And Ayyub alayhi salam's patience is so amazing that it's become a parable. Right? His patience is considered to be a standard. So there's a saying that when people want to praise someone for their patience, they say he was patient like the patience of Ayyub. Right? Like he had this extreme amount of patience and endurance. Now again, the stories of all the prophets and messengers mentioned throughout the Quran are a source of guidance and inspiration. The main purpose, the main objective of all of these stories is to guide us, to give us guidance in life. And more importantly, to inspire us towards certain deeds and towards certain actions. They teach us how we're supposed to respond and behave in certain situations, what type of attitudes to adopt, and how to properly express gratitude and patience. So the prophets were tested with a number of different difficulties. Some of the prophets, they were rejected. Right? Some of the prophets were called liars. Some of the prophets were disbelieved and they faced persecution and torture. And those were the stories of Musa, Ibrahim, and Lut alayhi salam, even Nuh alayhi salam. And then some of the prophets, they were given the opposite. They were given a lot of wealth, blessing, and comfort, like Dawood and Sulaiman alayhi salam. And then some prophets were afflicted with personal difficulties, with personal hardships, like Ayyub alayhi salam. So each of these stories, each of these incidents teaches us how to respond, how to react, how to behave, what attitudes and what perspectives we're supposed to have. So basically we have examples of prophets facing every type of test we can think of. Every single one of them showed us how to pass those tests by turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The common theme, the common denominator between every single prophet is that they would always turn to whom? Allah. And that's the baseline, that's the essence of all of these stories. That our reliance, our trust, our help comes directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's important for us to realize the reality of this world, that this world is a test, and that's one of the reasons why we're here and why we exist. And the people most severely tested in this world were the prophets. So once the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was asked that, Ya Rasulullah, Ayyun nasi ashaddu bala'an, that, O Messenger of Allah, which of the people are tried most severely? Right? Which individuals in this world are given the most difficult test? They face the most hardships and trials and tests. The Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Anbiya. Right? The people who are tried the most are the prophets. ثُمَّ الْأَمْثَلُ فَالْأَمْثَلُ. Then those who are closest to them and those who are closest to them. So the Prophet ﷺ is telling us that those individuals, those believers who are closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who are following in the footsteps of the prophets and messengers, they will be the most severely tested. And that's a reality of this world. Right? That's a reality that all of us have to come to terms with. We're going to be tested in our health, in our wealth, in our families, in our lives, in every single aspect we can think of. We're going to face some sort of difficulty. And then the Prophet ﷺ continued and said, فَيُبْتَلَى الرَّجُلُ عَلَى حَسَبِ دِينِهِ. A man is tried according to his religion. فَإِنْ كَانَ دِينُهُ صُلْبًا اشْتَدَّ بَلَاؤُهُ. If his religion is firm, if the person is firm in their faith, then his trials are more severe. Ajib, right? It seems counterintuitive. It seems the opposite. وَإِنْ كَانَ فِي دِينِهِ رِقَّةٌ أُبْتُلِيَ عَلَى حَسَبِ دِينِهِ. And if his religion is a little bit weak, if he is frail in his religion, then he is tried according to the strength of his religion. فَمَا يَبْرَحُ الْبَلَاءُ بِالْعَبْدِ حَتَّى يَتْرُكَهُ يَمْشِي عَلَى الْأَرْضِ مَا عَلَيْهِ خَطِيئَةٌ. And this is a beautiful point. A servant shall continue to be tried until he is left walking upon the earth without any sins whatsoever. So at the end of this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he's telling us one of the hikam, one of the divine wisdoms behind being tried and tested in this world. That one of the reasons Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends difficulties our way is so that our sins are forgiven in this world. So we're not going to be held accountable for them in the akhirah. So it's all about perspective. It's all about changing the way we look at things. That when we fall ill, when we become sick, when our parents become paralyzed and bedridden, these aren't things that are necessarily bad. Right? Obviously, they're difficult to deal with emotionally, spiritually, even psychologically. They're difficult situations, but these might actually be good for them. Every single thing that they're facing here is a source of expiation for their sins. Their sins are literally falling off like anything. Right? The Prophet ﷺ told us that every single thing that harms a believer is a source of their sins being forgiven and washed away. So much so that even the prick of a thorn, right? Even the prick of a thorn causes sins to be forgiven. So these individuals, oftentimes are elderly in our communities. They're old people in our communities. At the end of their life, they face a lot of difficulties. Some people, they experience dementia, they experience Alzheimer's, they go through, they become bedridden, they become paralyzed, they experience strokes, etc., whatever it may be. All of these things obviously are difficulties for them in this life, but they're also a blessing in disguise, right? And that's all about perspective. It's all about how you look at it. Those things can be a source of their salvation in the akhirah. It can be a way for them, being home free, being scot free in the hereafter. So again, one of the reasons why this story is being mentioned is to teach us about patience. It's to teach us about sabr. That no matter what we're tried with, what difficulty we go through in this life, we're supposed to carry it with patience and patiently persevere through it. And we're supposed to look at it as a form of a blessing, not as a form of punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the attitude of a believer. And if we actually adopt that attitude, then we will be people who are the most content in this world. We will be people who are happy, don't have problems in life, we're not stressed, we're not depressed, we're not facing any difficulties. So inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant all of us the patience of Ayyub. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant all of us the fortitude, the servitude, the strength of the prophets and the messengers. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to walk in their footsteps. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to raise our children in their footsteps as well, to inculcate these great characteristics and traits of patience and gratitude within them, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept this from us, placed on our scale of good deeds on the day of judgment, inshallah. Any questions? Any random questions?
Dua that Prophet Ayyub alayhi salatu wasalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him to make a dua like this. It is, we should, in difficulty,
read this dua.
read it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is one of the du'as we're supposed to read in the times of difficulty. Whether it's financial difficulty, physical difficulty, any type of difficulty, this is one of the du'as to read. Right, this is one of the du'as that's mustajab, it's accepted inshallah. It's a du'a of a prophet. Nah. So the questions don't have to be related, they can be random as well, don't worry. Alright, khair. So inshallah we will continue with the surah next week. So next week we'll try to finish off the stories of the remaining prophets. I think there's only 3 or 4 mentioned left. We'll finish off those stories, and inshallah we'll finish the story before Ramadan. We'll finish the surah before Ramadan. Alright, subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanallah bihamdihi, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.